So we can use everything we learned so far to test the to-do component. And the only thing we're going to learn is how to pass props to a component. And let's add the test. To-do test TS. And then let's specify the path by pressing P in our terminal. And we can say source components tests. And now we should be watching this file. And we should get an error because we don't have any tests. So if I scroll here, first we're going to test if the to-do displays the to-do item, and you can argue if this is an implementation detail because basically we're testing if Svelte does its job, right? And we shouldn't be testing the framework, but we're just getting some practice. So first let's import the component. Import to-do from to-do Svelte, and then let's add our test. Should display to-do item. And we pass it a function, and then let's create the to-do. I'm going to give it an ID and a text. And we're going to say completed is false. And then let's declare the props so it's easier to pass them. We can just spread them. Edit to-do, and we can just say jest function that's used for mocking functions, and we can also pass in an empty function and it would be fine, but you can use this. Remove to-do, jest function, complete to-do, jest function, and it also has a duration prop with 0, right? We can fix this code here. And let me just show you, for example, if I go to do Svelte, here are all our props. So we have a to-do, complete to-do, remove to-do, edit to-do, and a duration. So we can close this, and then let's render the component, right? So we're rendering the to-do. And first we're passing the to-do itself, right? And then we can spread other props we don't care about. And because we're not testing the logic here, because this logic lives in our parent, we just have to satisfy it or it's going to complain that it requires those props. And then we can assert if these functions are called, because we're not testing the logic here, but the component itself, right? Yeah, so we can do an assertion. We can say expect screen. Let's just import it first. Yeah, we can say screen from testing library, get by text, and then we can say to do, case insensitive, to be in the document. And our test should be passing. That's awesome. So we're going to be repeating this logic across our test, and it's going to get tedious. So let's refactor it into its own helper function. First, let me just add spacing here, because I like to be neat and tidy. And if we go here, we can see in the example, we're just creating a function, render to do, that accepts a to do. And then we're going to cut the props and our render method. And then we're just going to return the props. And instead of let to do, now we're going to use our function, render to do, and we're going to pass the to do item as a prop. And our test should be passing. So let's add a test if the user is able to check and uncheck a to do item. So we're going to test this, right? So let me just scroll here. And then we're going to add a new test. Test should be able to check and uncheck to do item as completed. Since we're using fire event, we're going to have to say async. And then we can just copy creating the to-do. You can say let to-do input screen get by test ID. And then we can await. Let's import the right one. Testing library. We're going to say click to do input. So we've selected it, right? And we're saying click. And now we need to make sure it's actually checked, right? So expect to do input to be checked. And then we need to make sure it's unchecked. So we can say await, fire event, click, the same to do input. And then we expect the to do input not to be checked. And our test should be passing. So another thing I want to test is if the to do item has a class of completed when checked. So if we look here, so pay attention to this, it should have a class of completed. And that gives us the animation we're seeing here, right? So we can go back. We can scroll down here. This test should be simple. This should have class of completed when checked. Then we also have an async function. And let's again render the to-do, but this time we want to make sure completed is true. So you can say to-do item screen get by text new item. So let's expect to-do item to have class, and these methods are really intuitive, as you can see. Let's just make it fail first, right? Because you should make your tests always fail first. And it should fail. And if you look here, should have class of completed when checked. Expected element to have class completed, but it received this junk, right? So you can just say true. And it's passing. Awesome. So let's test if the to item gets updated if you press the enter or escape key, because that's how it works, right? Because we're here. And if we're editing it or something, we can press escape or enter, and it should invoke the function to edit the to-do, right? And that's all we're testing. We're not really testing the logic, but if it's invoking the function. And that's an important thing to remember. So if we scroll down here, let's add those tests. Test should update to-do item when you press enter. It is going to be async. Yeah, so we can destructure the edit to do from the props we exported. We can say render to do. Actually, let's just paste the one from here. Yeah, that should be fine. And let's say to do item screen get by text to do item. Say await fire event. Oh, double click, my bad. Double click to do item, because that's how we get into the editing state. So we're literally selecting the to do item and then getting into the editing state. So we can get the editing input, and that's the input right here that appears when you're editing the item. Yeah, so let's get that. Let editing input screen get by test ID. And then we can await fire went key down, on which element, the editing input, and what key was pressed. Enter. And it's simple as that. So we just want to make sure this is called. So we can say expect edit to do to have been called, and they should pass. So let's add the other one. Set test should update to do item when you press escape. And this is also async. And let's do the same thing. I think we can even, yeah, let's just copy it. And then let's query the item. Screen get by text. To do item. Fire event, double click. To do item. We say let editing input. Screen get by test ID. And then we can await fire event. Key down. The editing input. And what key is it this time? It's escape, of course. And it's literally the same code. And then we can expect edit to do to have been called. Yeah, and it should pass. So that's it for testing the to-do component.